Okay, perfect. We are live now. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everybody who's tuned in today for a very interesting session on our next LinkedIn Live. And today we have a very special guest. But before we kick into the discussions, I want to do a quick audio and video check for anybody who's already joining us. Can you please confirm whether you can see us and hear us clearly? Just type yes in the comment box so we know that audio video is working before we kickstart the session. Just type yes in the comment box to let us know that you can hear us clearly, see us clearly. Okay, I assume it is working fine, but anyway, let's go through. Today we have a Varsha says is yes, so perfect. Thank you, Varsha, for confirming that. Today we have a very special guest on our session and somebody with whom a lot of you might already be familiar with, uh, Gautam Ghosh. And before I get into the formal introduction of Gautam, actually me and Gautam go way back, and we are actually schoolmates. We studied together back in Lucknow till 10th, I think, right? And
Yes,
then and
till
then we
10th at least.
and then we went a separate ways. So we go way long, good friends, good buddies, and we still stay in touch. So welcome, Gautam, to today's show. Thank you for taking time off.
Thank you, Harsh. It's been a pleasure to reconnect with you after all these years, and uh, I'm very happy to interact and with all your followers on LinkedIn, and hopefully we'll be adding a little bit of value and learnings to them, and I hope to learn from you and the rest of the audience also.
Perfect. Thank you. So let me give a very sort of the formal way to introduce Gautam. Gautam is a HR and social business consultant. Today he works independently. He has been the director of talent branding for Flipkart earlier on. He's also been general manager HR strategy for Philips India. And while all this was a professional experience, I think over time he has built a great reputation in being an HR thought leader, not just in India but across the globe. And he has been recognized by various national and international associations as one of the most influential people when it comes to HR and social media, right? So, Gautam, I will not take your limelight. I would like you to walk us through your journey, anything you want to highlight, so that people who are not familiar with you may know more about you.
Well, I've probably been one of India's earliest bloggers, and I think being in the right time and the right place, I was lucky to, be there in the early 2000s when the internet was just taking off, and then subsequently with Twitter and the rest of social media taking off. I'm just I would just consider myself very lucky and very fortunate to have been part of this journey and have made you know uh, a community of friends and connections worldwide, people who are interested in HR and interested to know, kind of forward thinking about how all this change, because whenever media changes, society itself changes. So social
Hmm.
media is a different kind of media because it's not the one to many or one to one communication that we had. So from prehistoric times, we had one-to-one communications. Telephone was again one-to-one. Letters were one-to-one. With the rise of radio and TV, it became one-to-many. You had a broadcast. So society changes as and when modes of media change. But social media is the first time where many-to-many conversations can happen. And
Hmm.
therefore, institutional power, the power of institutions is moving from power is moving from institutions to individuals. An individual can now have their voice heard in a much more, so it's no longer broadcast. So while a lot of organizations in the marketing domain, in the employer domain, are still caught up in the broadcast, so they use social media as a broadcast tool, but they don't account for the fact that now people can talk back, and that talk
Hmm.
back is not just like letters to the editor. They're not chosen, they're not filtered, and other people also can jump into that conversation. That you, the conversation between two people is now transparent, and that is a fundamental shift, I think. And what I and a lot of the HR and organizational thinkers have been, and people who have been blogging for a long time are have been trying to see is how will this impact the relationship between a candidate, an employee, an alumni of an organization, and how will this change the power dynamics between organizations and people at large.
And that gives a good segue to the topic on hand today, right? We want to talk about employer branding in the new normal, right? And as you touched upon some of the things, right, whether it's social media, acceleration of digital platforms, remote working, how is the landscape changing for employers today? Because as things come back on track, I think how do you attract talent? How do you retain talent? How do you engage with talent? With technology, with social media, could play a big role, in differentiating which way the employees want to go, right? So that's the context of today's discussion. And I think no better person than Gautam to give his thoughts and share his ideas and wisdom. And he's been, as he said, he's been early adopter of the technology, and he continues to think about the future. So I think it will be a great experience for all of us to learn from you, get your thoughts and ideas. So what we'll do is I have a set of questions. I'm going to ask Gautam those questions, and towards the end we'll leave some time for any questions which the audience has. And if anything is not addressed within a time frame, you can keep on typing your comments or questions in the comment box, and we'll make sure that between me and Gautam we address that even after the session is over.
Yeah, and
Perfect.
just to kind of share, my Twitter ID is at Gautam Ghosh, GautamGhosh. So any conversations people want to have post this live session on Twitter over the next couple of days, weeks, whatever, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter. That's the platform I'm most active on. Also on LinkedIn. So, you know, message me on LinkedIn also, and hopefully we'll continue the conversation. Conversation won't be limited to this live session only.
Yes, perfect. Thank you so much. So I have a set of questions. Let's jump into those, Gautam. The first question, very basic and fundamental, right? We are now 10, 11 months into this current crisis, pandemic. Obviously, organizations responded to deal with the situation, to manage the situation, engage with employees. Uh, what are you seeing on the ground as of today when you're talking to organizations, when you're talking to business leaders? What are the thoughts going on in the minds of business leaders as far as current time period is concerned?
So, one is the pandemic accelerated the digital transformation of organizations. So, one quote that I read from somebody in Novartis, Switzerland, was they had a 3-year plan for a digital transformation, which they had to roll it out in 3 weeks because of the pandemic. So, you know, a lot of the things that organizations were very wary about or keeping on the back burner suddenly became very important and critical to be rolled out. So, because you couldn't survive without that. The other big change is things that were on the employee front, like employee wellness, mental health, managing anxiety, managing stress, which was earlier, a benefit and, not really stressed and not really uh, shown to be a big major part of what organizations were adding to their employees, suddenly became front and center of what. So essentially, employee wellness, both in regards to the pandemic as well as regards to working from home, the whole change and the stresses of the pandemic, of you know, and the uncertainty of when will it end, because this is not something that we know. Earlier people thought, okay, it's 6 months, it'll get over, some weeks it'll get over. Some people thought, you know uh, it's just like a flu, it'll be seasonal. And now we don't really know where, when, and how it'll change. And the uncertainties, some people who are people went to their native places, to their hometowns, moving ahead. A lot of people also lost their jobs. So uh, that is, I think, the big change I have seen, that organizations are now thinking not just in terms of perks and salaries, but as benefits to the employee. Wellness, mental health awareness, and managing anxiety and stress are becoming critical to how they think about their employees. That is, I think, one of the biggest changes.
And that leads to the next question. It nicely segues that with that context in mind, how important is employer branding now, right? Is it something which employer should focus on, or do you think it is something which employer should put on the back burner, and when everything comes back to normal, they should come back? So, what is your view on that?
So I think and I read this recently. Employer branding actually saves your time to hire as well as cost of hire.
Hmm.
If you have the right employer branding, you're not. Um, uh, and employer branding is not really, at a marketing level of branding that we're talking about. It's also about uh, looking at the culture of the organization that you have, and what do you want to be actually known for. So it's also, a lot of it is inward out. Why do
Hmm.
people come to work with us? Why do they stay? And what do they expect? So it's, if I am a hard, competitive, sales driven organization, I would want to portray that so that the wrong kind of people don't apply. People who
Hmm.
can't manage a hard, competitive, sales driven organization working for will not apply. So it's also a filter mechanism. It's not just for attracting, it's also for filtering. So you don't attract only the best candidate, you apply you get the right candidates. And
Hmm.
then it you act. So when employer branding is done right, you make jobs easier for your recruiters, your hiring managers, and people tend to stay on longer.
Hmm.
And earlier, we also so employer branding is essentially what people talk about you as an employer when you are not there in the room.
Hmm.
So it's about, so there are conversations happening on social sites. One big thing in India now is Quora. So if you go to and type any organization's name as on Quora and say how is it like to work at corporation XYZ,
Hmm.
and from PSUs to high tech product software companies, there are people writing and having conversations, and not just on sites like Glassdoor and other review sites, but also in these sites, and these are being seen by. So there are employees writing or ex-employees writing about how is it to work out there, and each of those conversations essentially builds uh, the reputation of the organization. So the employer brand is basically the organization's reputation in the market, and how
Hmm.
you treat your employees internally actually impacts that. How you treat every candidate who applies to your organization, every touch point, every experience that every candidate has impacts. So, for example, in today's world, and I've actually seen people tweeting out, "I've come to this company for an interview and they made me wait, and been waiting for 3 hours." So
Hmm.
so again, earlier an organization could get away with it, but now that, and we see that on LinkedIn every other day, people either cribbing or appreciating organizations. So
Hmm.
an employer branding essentially is, how do you change behaviors to actually reflect what values you profess. So
Hmm.
it's about values in use rather than values that are professed. It
Hmm.
basically makes a lot of that uh, black box which used to exist earlier when we were, candidates applying for organizations, because we didn't know what was going inside the organization. But now maybe it's not transparent, but it's very translucent. You could get a bigger idea.
Hmm.
And of course, a lot of organizations also leveraging their existing employees, uh, encouraging them to share what they are doing. So essentially, a lot of some organizations have called implemented what I call our employee advocacy programs. How do you
Hmm.
empower your employees to speak out? So a lot of employees want to speak out, saying, I like working in this organization, but they really don't know, should they not.
Hmm.
So if the organization clearly actually states that you are empowered to speak on behalf of the organization about the nature of your work, and you would want that, you would want your subject matter experts to be known out of the organization, so that people don't say I want to work for this organization because it's a great organization. They should actually personally feel connected, saying, hey, this person, this leader in this organization seems great because, or a subject matter expert seems great because he's got XYZ patents in his name, and I would like to work with him,
Hmm.
in an R&D setup. Or right now, people like Anand Mahindra, who kind of engage with people at a everyday level on Twitter, kind of builds an uh, perception of Mahindra being a transparent. So you say, okay, the CEO is transparent, so you know
Hmm.
maybe the organization is also. So at some level, this whole changes how people relate to organizations. It's not just the salary and the job anymore. It's about
Hmm.
people relating to people. So a lot of times people kind of say, okay, uh, if I'm applying to this organization, let me figure out who all are on LinkedIn, who is likely to be my manager,
Hmm.
and they'll see and if that person doesn't have too many endorsements, uh, is very sketchy on or doesn't have a full profile on LinkedIn, people kind of say, hey, this person doesn't seem like a great manager to work with because he's not taking time off to. So a
Hmm.
lot of these nuances also comes on. Uh, I remember in Philips and in Flipkart, we had to kind of say, what does everybody's profile say about the organization? So, when you write, I am
Hmm.
a manager XYZ in XYZ company, how do you describe the company? And is that description consistent across the profiles?
Hmm.
Because the company also evolves. The person who joined you 7 years ago might have written something, but your company has evolved, and the manager who's joined you 2 years ago might have written something different because your strategy, your products, or has evolved and your thinking has evolved as an organization. So how do you? But when a person looks at these two people and they might be at the same level and say, "Hey, why is this very different from
Hmm.
this person to this person?" And so a lot of the times was also about cleaning up LinkedIn profiles to share a consistent message of the organization externally.
Hmm.
The other thing is, how do you make your job descriptions attractive? A job description is pretty boring, and you see a manager of say procurement from one company to the other, it will be the same thing. How do you
Hmm.
convey what the company does and what that role is? Otherwise, it's commodified. I will apply to this company or this company
Hmm.
because the job description is technically the same. So, how do
Hmm.
you showcase your culture in your job description also?
Hmm.
So, each touch point where a candidate, right from seeing from so, and I say it's the employer branding is also like the marketing funnel. There's awareness, there's attraction, there's application, there's shortlisting, there's hire, and then from hire you move on to the next step, which is advocacy. When you
Hmm.
hire somebody, you want that person to be an advocate. So uh, the marketing funnel is almost replicated, but there's a additional part of interviewing and selection where things could go wrong. And I think Virgin in the UK said that if you piss off a candidate, and I'm sorry for using that word, but if
Hmm.
you treat a candidate badly during the interview process, the candidate might not be, you might lose that candidate as a customer also.
Hmm.
For and if it's like a mobile phone, Virgin Mobile, you lose that customer's value for the whole lifetime because
Hmm.
he's treated badly as a candidate. And this is probably when they're starting fresh in their careers. So you basically
Hmm.
lost 40 years worth of lifetime customer value because you
Hmm.
treated a candidate badly. And they actually came up with a figure, and that's when suddenly the marketing guys in Virgin woke up and said, how are you treating your candidates? Are you treating them well enough? Because it has a business impact also.
So I think what I'm taking away from this is, Gautam, branding is no more about just marketing piece of it. I think much bigger than that. How does a company want to be positioned, perceived? How do they want their values to be translated into every action and decision they take, every message they send out
Absolutely.
internally and externally? And how do their leaders showcase those values in everything they do, right? And if people see, that's one message I'm taking. The other I'm also taking that today, with so much of presence in digital media, I think employees are having these various multiple data points, to look into, tap into before they make a decision whether I should join an organization or not. And so I think it becomes imperative for organizations to keep their eyes and ears open if they want to be relevant in this space. And I always talk about coaching, the concept of say, do, and mean. So they do what they say, and they say what they mean, right? And this is true at an organization level also, in every message. So I think that's a great point. uh, and now what I want to understand from you and your experience in dealing with your own clients and leaders is, what do you think organizations are doing well in this space around employer branding, and what do you think employers should do more of,
So again, there are some organizations that are doing well, uh, and and there are many organizations that are still on the starting of the maturity curve, still thinking in broadcast terms rather than conversations. And because as I said, it's uh, many to many conversations, and it doesn't scale if you're just broadcasting. So how do you get, how do you build a community of people who are passionate about the organization? And there are organizations that are doing that well. Again, uh, there are more. They are more the exceptions than the norm, uh, and that's why they stand out. So uh, how do you empower? And it's again basically saying, if I think of a certain company, do I think of people in it, or do I think of a monolith? Uh,
Hmm.
and when an organization is encouraging its employees to speak out, its ambassadors to speak out, or advocates to speak out on its behalf, that's when it's more, because people and people, and this comes from research of the Edelman Trust Barometer. People trust people like us
Hmm.
rather than uh, and there's a whole barometer of trust in which Edelman tracks on a uh, annual level, which basically talks about, do people trust analysts, expert, politicians, journalists, people like us, and
Hmm.
people like us is always in the top two or three. Uh, you know, Either experts or analysts, or people like us are the people are where trust we tend to trust more their
Hmm.
opinions. So if a friend tells me that his company is great because it has XYZ and he likes working there, and this is what we used to do pre-digital era, we would talk about saying who works in this company. We'll ask our friends, and our friends will say that person works, and then I will ask,
Hmm.
how is it as a place. So those conversations are now amplified. What I
Hmm.
would find out, by asking 3 4 people, now I can post on Facebook and ask 5,000 people, or
Hmm.
post on LinkedIn and ask for 5,000 people, and that can read out to. So the wisdom of the crowds is what comes in. I
Hmm.
don't have to rely on just one person's judgment, which I had to do in the pre-digital era. I can now see what is the consistent message that's coming in about this company. Is it
Hmm.
70% positive and 30% negative, or is it 40% positive and 60% negative? And that gives me, and a way to make up my mind whether, and what is the positivity about and what is the negativity about. And then I'll probably go to Glassdoor and see, Glassdoor kind of pulls that out, saying benefits are good, uh, top management is not so good. So if I So depending on the role that I'm doing, is benefit more important to me or interaction with top management is more important to me? I would take a call basically on that. So those are the changes that have occurred due to the whole aspect of digital communication and company review sites coming in.
Now, one thing very contextual I want to understand, because you mentioned, of course, we all know there have been job losses, salary cuts. So, and for maybe the situation continues for some more time till things come back on track. Employees can today think of either job security or income security, maybe not both. Now, in that context, how important is the brand for an employee from an employee perspective when they are looking out either first job or looking for a change in job?
So I think one is the one about the so again the brand itself is of, as you said, uh, is the brand seen as secure? If security is important to me in this kind of time, is a brand seen as a place where you know uh, which offers a fairly large consistent career growth? So, and if the brand wants to leverage that, it should basically say this is the career paths we have for employees, and this is how we develop employees, how you might grow in this system. That conveys, that we look after our employees. We are invested in your growth. You're not here just to work on one job and then we are not. So if the company is investing in you, then the company is saying it's looking at a long term relationship. So, and that, and since I also come from a learning and development background prior to all this, a lot of people who are surveyed now kind of say they'll be willing to forego uh, 30%, 20% salary uh, rises in favor of development. Because if in today's world, skilling, reskilling, upskilling, uh, I would rather my organization did it for me than I doing it just for myself, spending my own money. So if I'm getting developed by an organization, that is also a benefit that's on top of my actual salary. So if an organization is investing in me $1,000 a year, that is also a benefit that is probably quantifiable, and it will add value to me even if I go out of this system later.
Perfect. No,
Again,
that sounds great.
there are paradoxes. Organizational learning can be very organizational contextual, which is it won't add much value outside the system, but it could be also be an organization sends you to say ISB to do a course, and that certificate is essentially something that you will carry on throughout your life. So there are both kind of learnings within an organization context that people can do. But again, people prefer organizations to have which invest more in career development and the long term development. So that adds a lot more comfort to the people who are saying, I want security and development right now.
Yeah, and I think on the part of learning, especially when you try to go on your own, a lot of times the social pressure acts you a lot, and you end up doing a lot of courses and training programs on your own, which may or may not have any relevance to your current job or the future job, right? So sometimes if you try to get into the learning spree, which happened last 1 year, right? Everybody was doing so many courses and online. And sometimes it was relevant, sometimes it was just because everybody was posting those course completion certificates. So you felt almost compelled to do and post it so that you are not left out. I think that's also a trend.
It's like
Fine. So
FOMO, fear of missing out.
exactly right. So I know we are on time. Just one last question, Gautam, and I think this is relevant. Like a lot of new employees who are joining now, or maybe in the last couple of months, who have never physically visited or met their managers. I think this situation will remain for some time, right? There could be a set of employees who have not physically met their managers at all. Do you think
Right.
there is a role social media can play in bridging this gap in any form?
Yeah. So yes, there are two parts. One is uh, so we are so used to having we were so used to having a physical onboarding program where new employees come in, interact with each other, interact with the senior leaders, interact with uh, the various teams that they would work with. And what organizations are learning is how to do this and still not lose the essence, but do it in a virtual way. So both asynchronous as well as synchronous. So synchronous could be, Zoom calls, etc. But also also trying to figure out what differently do they need to do to really uh, convey the organization culture. So one of the big things that some organization leaders, even Satya Nadella and the others, have said was, will organizational culture suffer? And that's because we are now so remote. And um, I think the Mondelez India HR head, shared this recently, saying on a virtual, it'll still the same culture, but it is just articulated in a different way. Uh, you have much less control over an employee because that employee is at home. There are distractions, but the culture was described by Sumantra Ghoshal as the smell of a place. So how do you convey the smell of a place virtually? It's also about how people interact. Are people helpful? Is a is a company culture of collaboration helping, or is it so whatever interaction the earlier people were having, which are translating now or virtually, will also convey that to the new employees. So this is how people interact. This is how things are done. This is how, you know I can reach out without telling my manager to somebody in a different department, ask for help. But the other, I have to go through a manager when I want to go to another team. So how do things get done around here doesn't change. Uh, it's just now no longer physical, but it becomes virtual. And I think uh, that is what organizations are really uh, discovering, that which is the uh, what do you call it, the ups and downs of this conversation, of this uh, interaction that is happening between. So how do you, and of course it's always easy to uh, err on the side of over communication rather than under communication. A lot of times and of course it's the organizations, uh, what organizations realized was the managers were not really equipped to handle suddenly. The manager's job becomes critical. The first line manager or the middle management becomes more critical, because now you have to handhold them to how to manage a virtual. Leaders can do town halls and everything, but it's the daily way of how work is getting done, and how managers. That is where a manager can't expect all seven of their direct reports to be throughout the day on a Zoom call. Zoom fatigue will set in, or you can't have a Zoom meeting for everything. So how do you? So managers have to be handheld, and that is where I think most of the development, the better organizations have done a better job of managing how their managers transition to managing virtually. I think that is the uh, thing that separates what organizations have done better versus what organizations have not been managed to well.
Yeah, and I think, as you rightly said, I think the need is for managers and leaders to let go of that need to control, right? Because sometimes when you are virtual, you feel that there is a perceived lack of control, that I don't know what my team is doing, but I think there's somewhere as
Right.
managers, they need to let go of their control, right? Perfect. I know we are well over time. Thank you so much, Gautam, for sharing
My
those
pleasure.
experience wisdoms. We'll now open up quickly for any questions the audience have. And before that, if anybody wants to connect with you, I know you mentioned Twitter. Anywhere else, if anybody wants to connect,
Just
anything
send
else?
me an email at gautam.ghosh@gmail.com.
Okay, gautam.ghosh@gmail.com is the email address. Twitter ID Gautam is already shared. Please connect with him if you have any further follow-up questions, any doubts, or if you want to engage him for your organization. But let's just look at some of the audience comments. And if you anybody who has any specific question, if you can type in the comment box, we can pick up. I know there is something I'm reading. Uh, so Kavinder says employers will be looking for right candidates for the organization. In the face of these turbulent times, don't you think that the adaptability quotient should weigh and matter more than IQ, EQ, SQ?
Well, adaptability is a function of, I think, EQ itself.
Hmm.
It's about how you respond to situations. And so, yes, adaptability, agility, whatever you choose to call it, is a big factor of how what people will look for in people in their candidates going forward. And that's also I said, if the organization is adaptable and agile, it will want agile candidates.
Hmm.
If the agile candidates are there, but the organizational culture really does not, give them a space to be agile, then it'll. Uh, so then that organization is not a perfect fit for that person himself. So, but overall, I think yes, even organizations which are not agile earlier have seen the wisdom of being agile and of pivoting quickly and this has been actually forced onto them. So if you
Hmm.
want to survive, you have to be agile. So I think
Yeah,
that is a given.
I think whether it's organization, leaders, or individuals, right? This is no more a time of survival of the fittest. I think it is survival of the fastest, right? So how
Right.
quickly can you really adapt is what will determine success. Perfect. Next question we have from AK. AK says that in the remote work scenario, shiny offices may no longer influence potential employees. What are the parameters that could help companies stand out? As far as I
So
think EB, yeah, EB, I think employee benefits. I'm assuming he mentions. Uh,
so I didn't get what kind of officers.
so he's saying, I think he means that shiny big offices, which attract
Right,
you.
right,
Just the office space is attractive. You want to work in
right,
that
right.
space, that building. If that is no more relevant because you're not going to office for some time. In the absence of that, what do you think companies should focus on to stand out?
I think uh, yeah, that's another thing. Right now, earlier you would compete for talent on the basis of the geography. If you're in
Hmm.
Gurgaon, you would attract your first people to attract would be people in Gurgaon. You would kind of say, okay, I would look at people from Mumbai and Bangalore later because there's. But now, and people and organization in Bangalore would essentially look at talent in Bangalore before looking at talent from other places. But now, thanks to remote working, a small uh, player can compete with the best talent anywhere in the world if they want to.
Hmm.
So it flattens the playing field where just the work and the quality of work and the quality of people is what matters rather than big shiny offices.
Hmm.
And so today I can be in Goa and work for a company. I mean, a creative house in New York. You know,
Hmm.
uh, I mean, there are organizations which are now going purely remote, especially
Hmm.
small startups, and they are competing with the larger, especially in the creative spaces of advertising, design. So now you can compete with anybody for the talent and how you manage to tell your story. Why should somebody in New York want to work with a advertising startup, say in Kolkata? What can
Hmm.
that? Uh, what will uh, attract that person in New York to work for? So people from New York are also moving to their smaller towns because they're saying New York, Madison Avenue now doesn't make sense. A lot of you know talent is moving out of New York and going to their uh, places that they came from Iowa, Utah, small Midwestern towns, and so the whole and we don't know whether this will be permanent or not, but a lot of things that made these big urban centers a density are actually, and we've seen that in India also. People from the larger organizations like uh, Indian IT services firms in Bangalore, etc., have seen a lot of their people move out to cities where they came from and are working there because now you can work remotely on client projects. Clients are not clients who were earlier adamant on people working at a certain office for, and the government is also kind of looking at giving breaks for ITSEZ related kind of, and this, while this did not came up in the budget, but the government kind of has relaxed the norms for software export zones in the IT spaces to accommodate working from home right now also. So those things that were earlier looked at regulatory and things are also being kind of uh,
Considered.
being loosened and looked at with new glasses, if you will.
Perfect. I don't know about you. If I'm in Goa, I don't want to work really, right? So anyway, anyway, thank you so much. I know we are well over time. I think there are a couple of questions, but what we'll do is, Gautam, we'll take them offline. If you can respond to those comments in LinkedIn itself, that would be useful
Great.
because because we're already at the 40 minutes mark. But yeah, thank you for everybody who has joined in, dialed in. I hope you found the discussion engaging. And thank you, Gautam, for taking time off and sharing your experience and your wisdom and your insights. I'm sure everybody found it insightful, and there are some takeaways for employees and employers alike. And thank you so much.
My
Perfect.
pleasure.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thank
Bye
you so
bye.
much, Harsh. Thank you so much,
Bye
Harsh.
bye.
And
Yeah.
have
Bye.
everybody, wish everybody a great evening, great morning, great afternoon, wherever they are. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.